Every single year, the average American consumes nearly 30 pounds of these. Across the globe, we are talking about billions of tons of potatoes, sliced, submerged in boiling fat, and seasoned to perfection. It is the undisputed king of the side dish, the universal language of the drive-thru. It is the French fry. But here is the thing. Almost everything you think you know about this food is a lie. It isn't French. For centuries, it was considered a literal poison, a tool of the devil that caused leprosy and madness. It was a food of last resort, grown in the shadows of empires, fueled by war, and propelled to global dominance by a series of high-stakes geopolitical gambles. We are talking about a botanical immigrant from the Andes that was rejected by Europe, embraced by starving peasants, and eventually weaponized by the American industrial complex. This is not just a story about a snack. This is a story about how a toxic underground tuber broke the cycle of European famine, funded the rise of empires, and eventually reshaped the very chemistry of the human brain. To understand how we got here, we have to go back, way back. Before the Golden Arches, before the bistros of Paris, we have to go to a place where the air is thin, the ground is frozen, and the potato was a god. 8,000 years ago, on the windswept plateaus of the Andes, the potato was a wild, bitter, and frankly dangerous weed. It belongs to the times Solanaceae times family, the nightshades. Its cousins are tobacco, belladonna, and mandrake. In its wild state, the potato is packed with glycoalkaloids, natural toxins designed to kill anything that tries to eat it. But the indigenous peoples of the Altiplano did something miraculous. Through millennia of selective breeding, they domesticated the forbidden fruit. They didn't just grow it, they worshipped it. They measured time by how long it took to cook a potato. They used it as a unit of currency, a medicinal poultice, and a divine sacrifice. They created times chuño, times the world's first freeze-dried food, by leaving potatoes out to freeze in the mountain nights and then stomping the moisture out of them during the day. It was a biological insurance policy against starvation. Then, in the 1530s, the world changed. The Spanish conquistadors arrived, looking for gold and silver. They found plenty of that, but tucked away in the holds of their returning ships was a cargo that would ultimately prove more valuable than all the Incan gold combined, the potato. But when the potato arrived in Europe, it wasn't greeted with open arms. It was met with horror. To the 16th century European mind, the potato was an abomination. It wasn't mentioned in the Bible. It grew underground, the realm of the dead. Its gnarled, lumpy skin looked like the hands of a leper. In fact, for decades, it was widely believed in France and Prussia that eating potatoes caused leprosy, syphilis, and the vapors. In 1748, the French Parliament officially banned the cultivation of potatoes. They were deemed unfit for human consumption, relegated to the status of pig feed or ornamental garden flowers. While the rest of the world's calories came from grain crops that grew upward toward God's sun, the potato remained a clandestine, subterranean secret, waiting for a catalyst to drag it into the light. That catalyst was war. Total, relentless, pan-European war. In the mid-1700s, Europe was a meat grinder. Armies marched across the continent, burning wheat fields and seizing grain stores. If you were a peasant in the 18th century, a field of wheat was a death sentence. It was easy to see, easy to burn, and easy to steal. Enter Antoine Parmentier. Parmentier was a French military pharmacist who was captured by the Prussians during the 7 Years' War. In a Prussian prison, he was fed a steady, mandatory diet of potatoes. To his shock, he didn't get leprosy. He didn't die. In fact, he became healthier than he had ever been. When he was released and returned to France, Parmentier realized he had discovered a geopolitical superweapon. The potato was calorie-dense, easy to grow in poor soil, and most importantly, it was war-proof. You could march an army over a potato field and the crop would remain safe, hidden 6 inches beneath the soil. But how do you convince a nation that thinks a food is poisonous to start eating it? You don't use logic, you use psychology. Parmentier staged one of the greatest PR stunts in human history. He planted a patch of potatoes on the outskirts of Paris and petitioned King Louis XVI to provide him with a contingent of elite royal guards to protect the field. The message to the public was clear. Whatever is growing in there must be incredibly valuable if the king is guarding it. Then, Parmentier gave the guards a specific order. Don't actually guard it. Be lazy, take bribes, and at night, go home. Predictably, the locals began sneaking into the field and stealing the forbidden tubers. They planted them in their own gardens, thinking they were robbing the crown of a delicacy. Within years, the potato had moved from the prison cell to the royal palace. Parmentier even hosted dinners for dignitaries like Benjamin Franklin, serving nothing but potato-based courses. But we still don't have the time's fry. While the French were busy with their psychological games, the people of the Meuse Valley, in what was then the Spanish Netherlands, were facing a particularly brutal winter in 1680. The poor villagers here relied on small fried fish caught from the river as their primary source of protein. But that winter, the Meuse froze solid. The river was a sheet of glass. The fish were unreachable. In a moment of desperate culinary improvisation, the villagers took their winter stores of potatoes, sliced them into thin, finger-like strips mimicking the shape of the small fish they could no longer catch, and tossed them into the hot fat. This is the legendary birth of the fry. It wasn't an artisanal creation. It was a survival tactic. It was a fake fish for a starving population. So, if the Belgians invented it, why do we call them French fries? The answer lies in a linguistic misunderstanding that occurred over a century later, involving a future American president, a global war, and a very specific way of cutting vegetables. But as the 18th century drew to a close, the stage was set. The potato had conquered the fear of the masses. It had the backing of the French elite, and in the dark, cold corners of Belgium, it had finally met the deep fryer. The world was about to change. Not because of a king or a general, but because of a cheap, greasy, golden stick of starch that was about to fuel the Industrial Revolution. While the Belgians were perfecting the technique in the 1700s, the world didn't call them Belgian fries. They called them French, because in the 18th and 19th centuries, France was the cultural capital of the universe. If it was sophisticated, if it was culinary, it had to be French. But the real linguistic smoking gun involves a man who is arguably America's first true foodie, Thomas Jefferson. In 1802, Jefferson hosted a dinner at the White House. His chef, Honoré Julien, a Frenchman, prepared a dish described as potatoes served in the French manner. In Jefferson's own handwritten notes, he describes pommes de terre frites à cru en petites tranches, potatoes deep-fried while raw, in small slices. This is the bridge. This is the moment the fry crosses the Atlantic and enters the American lexicon. But it wasn't a mass-market hit yet. It was an elite artisanal delicacy. To make fries in 1802, you needed a massive amount of expensive lard or oil, a dedicated hearth, and a chef who knew the precise chemistry of the Maillard reaction. This chemical reaction is the secret to why fries rule our brains. When the sugars and amino acids in a potato hit 300 degrees Fahrenheit, they transform. They create hundreds of new flavor compounds that don't exist in a boiled potato. It's a biological siren song. Our ancestors evolved to seek out calorie-dense fats and carbohydrates because they were rare. The French fry is a hyper-palatable delivery system, a perfect trifecta of salt, fat, and starch that triggers a dopamine dump in the nucleus accumbens. We aren't just eating a vegetable, we are hacking our evolutionary biology. The name French fry was finally cemented not in a kitchen, but in the mud of the Great War. American GIs stationed in Belgium during World War I were introduced to these fried potatoes by the local Belgian soldiers. Because the official language of the Belgian army at the time was French, the Americans simply called them French fries. They brought that name back to the States, and through the sheer power of American cultural export, the Belgian origin story was buried under a century of linguistic convenience. As the 20th century roared on, the French fry faced a scaling problem. If you wanted fries in 1940, a prep cook had to sit in the back of a diner, hand peeling and hand cutting every single potato. It was slow, it was inconsistent. And in the eyes of a young entrepreneur named Kroc, it was an inefficiency that needed to be killed. Enter the industrialization of the golden stick. Jr. Simplot, a billionaire potato farmer from Idaho, is the man who truly Americanized the fry. Before Simplot, fries were soggy and varied from batch to batch. In the early 1950s, Simplot's chemists perfected the flash freezing process. By par-frying the potatoes, then freezing them, they could lock in the starch structure. This changed everything. Now, a potato could be harvested in Idaho, processed in a massive factory, and shipped 3,000 miles to a McDonald's in Florida, tasting exactly the same as one in California. Ray Kroc was obsessed. He treated the French fry like a piece of high-precision hardware. He hired laboratory scientists to measure the solid-to-water ratio of potatoes. He insisted on the russet Burbank potato, a long, starch-heavy tuber that produced the iconic long, thin strips Americans craved. This created a biological and agricultural monopoly. To feed the world's growing addiction, we stopped growing thousands of varieties of potatoes. We turned the American landscape into a monoculture of the russet Burbank. By the 1960s, the French fry had moved from a Belgian survival tactic to an American industrial triumph. It was the side dish that became the main event. It was the ultimate commodity, cheap to produce, impossible to stop eating, and perfectly engineered for a world that was moving faster and faster. But there is a dark irony to this success. The potato, once a symbol of resilience that saved Europe from famine, has become a symbol of the modern health crisis. We have taken a miracle crop and stripped it of its skin, soaked it in industrial seed oils, and coated it in sodium. We consume over 30 pounds of frozen French fries per person, per year, in the United States alone. The commodity that once fueled empires now fuels an epidemic of metabolic syndrome. The devil's fruit that the 16th century priests feared has finally lived up to its name, but not through poison, through pleasure. In 1995, the potato became the first vegetable ever grown in space, aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. It is a testament to the potato's incredible adaptability. From the frost-bitten peaks of the Andes, to the deep fryers of Brussels, to the neon drive-thrus of the American highway, and finally, to the stars, the French fry is more than just a snack. It is a historical record of human ambition, greed, and ingenuity. It is a story of how we took a toxic tuber from the dirt and used it to build the modern world. We conquered the potato. We tamed its toxins. We engineered its crunch. But as we sit in our cars, reaching into a paper bag for that last, salty bit of golden starch, we have to ask ourselves, who is really in control? Did we master the potato? Or did the potato find a way to make itself the most successful organism on the planet by hacking the very chemistry of our brains?